Hello, everyone. Welcome to the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance webinar. As usual, I will give the participants time to come in. Please let us know who's here by introducing yourself in the chat, your name, organization, region will be helpful. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for your time. I look forward to having a great webinar with you. Hello, Mel. So glad you can join us. Please introduce yourselves in the chat. Thank you for joining. We'll give participants a few minutes to get in and get settled. Grab a drink of water. Hello, Cody. Hello, Steve. Hello, Brittany. Hello, Jesse. Hello, Kanetta. Hello, Chuck. Thank you for joining. The chat will at some point be faster than me. So if I missed your name, don't take it personal. Hello, Sam. Kai, hello. Thank you all for joining. We will give others a few minutes to join the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance March 20th webinar. Thank you for your time and participation. It is 1:01. We'll give about 2 more minutes for others to join. Thank you for your participation. We have an exciting webinar today, as we always do. But I think in today's climate, this webinar will be very helpful for us to remain mission focused. See a few more people joining. Thank you for joining. Thank you for your time. And hello to those who are just joining. One more minute. We'll give 1 more minute. Thank you for joining. Hello, Destiny. Hello, Sam. Thank you for joining, and welcome to the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance webinar. The title of this webinar is DEIA, What's Next? I would like to inform you that this webinar is convened with support from the Bank of America, and this is not a federally funded webinar. And the discussion today is, how do we stay mission-driven in today's climate? Next slide, please. The Interstate Renewable Energy Council, we're a national nonprofit working to accelerate the growth of clean energy and energy efficiency for everyone. We do this work through regulatory reform, local initiatives that help communities adopt resilient energy solutions, and workforce development, where we build connections among job seekers, students, employers, education providers, and community-based organizations. We provide technical assistance to advance innovative workforce development solutions, and we award nationally recognized credentials to clean energy training programs. Next slide, please. Again, we are so happy you're able to join us today. These are just a few ground rules for you. Want you to know that closed captioning is enabled. If you just select Show Caption from the controls bar at the bottom of the screen to enable, you will then receive closed captioning. Listeners are on mute. We will use the Q&A tab to send us any questions you have. We have plenty of time, so if you toggle to the bottom of your screen, you're more than welcome to add your question at any time. Artificial intelligence, IREC does not accept any artificial intelligence note takers or bot participation in the webinars. If there are any that have joined thus far, they will be removed. So thank you in advance for your understanding and cooperation. We always get questions about the presentation. The presentation is recorded, and you will receive the presentation and any other follow-up resources. Next slide, please. Today's agenda include a brief update on the Alliance, as all of the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance webinar does, as well as the featured presentation. We will have a short presentation on DEIA and a round robin of questions with our esteemed presenters, and then we will go into the question and answer. I am Janelle Hills. I am the Senior Director of Equitable Workforce Strategies, and the Workforce Department is led by Dr. Cynthia Finley, who is the Vice President of Workforce and Strategic Innovation. Today's presenters include Delmar Gillis, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Elevate, and Paul Francisco, who is the Director of Indoor Climate Research and Training Division of the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission. Next slide, please. And if you're on this webinar, you know good workforce development does not happen by accident. In order to rapidly scale a diverse and sustainable clean energy workforce, we will need to leverage best practices, resources, and create strong partnerships. And we consider all of you our partners. We continue to work to connect the dots and address clean energy workforce development more holistically by focusing on every aspect of workforce development. That's learner and new worker recruitment, employer development, deploying and assisting employers with retention strategies, and continuing to bring organizations out of our silos to discuss best practices and challenges, and how do we, again, stay mission driven. Next slide, please. The strategic focus of the Alliance includes training, education, and credentialing, funding and program design, recruitment and support of workers and learners, as well as employer recruitment and retention. So again, it's a very holistic approach. Michelle, you can go to the next slide. This is just a way for you to stay connected. Keep up to date by subscribing to the IREC newsletter. I'm sure Avery will be dropping in the chat the links to the Alliance website, as well as our LinkedIn page, where you will find that we have great resources and past webinars from the Alliance on the Alliance website. Next slide, please. The National Clean Energy Alliance webinar series happens every third Thursday, every other month. This year, we're approaching this a little differently. We used to be every month. Now we're every other month. So it is March. There's no webinar in April. So the next webinar will be on May 15th, and we will see you then. Next slide, please, Michelle. IREC is an industry intermediary for the Department of Labor to expand registered apprenticeship programs. These are our partners on that project. It is a national coalition of industry, training, and workforce development leaders who are expanding registered apprenticeships for clean energy. So we're excited about this project, and we're excited about our partners who are on this project. Next slide, please. Green Workforce Connect is IREC's workforce development strategy. And this is a platform where we are connecting job seekers, employers, training providers, and contractors to support a highly trained and diverse energy workforce. We are now, next slide, please, on our third iteration of Green Workforce Connect. And that will be to kind of fold in solar on Green Workforce Connect. You can find lots of great resources on this platform. So please visit this. I'm sure Avery is on it by dropping the link of Green Workforce Connect in the chat. but it is a very robust platform. So if you're interested, even if you're not, take a peek and see what we're up to here at IREC. Next slide, please. So diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility has been a hot topic lately. But we're really wanting to kind of talk about what's next. After his inauguration on January 20th, President Trump signed dozens of executive orders covering a broad range of issues, including DEIA and government grants and contracts, civic engagement, immigration, and certain nonprofit sectors. This rescinded all of the previous President Biden's executive orders, which were to expand DEI in federal government programs, the federal workforce, and underserved communities. So we're here to talk about what's next. How do we stay mission-driven, mission-focused in today's climate? And from here, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Paul Francisco for a short presentation on this topic, and then we'll come back for a robust conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hills. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. I will go through this. It won't take very long, just to give some statistics and kind of frame some of the importance of this issue to our larger work that we're trying to do, and the importance of the industry for communities all over. So, and we'll, as Dr. Hill says, there'll be plenty of time for questions and discussion afterwards. So next slide. So this here shows from IREC's National Solar Job Census from 2023, the demographics of people who are in the solar workforce. We see it as majority male, 70% male, 30% female. We see it as majority white, 73% white. The next largest demographic is Hispanic or Latino. One of the things that's really important here is that while women in the solar workforce have increased about 3% in the previous about 4 years, from about 2019, and Hispanic or Latino grew by about 6%. There really was no increase in participation in the solar workforce by Asians, by Black or African Americans, or by veterans, all of which are in that 8 to 9% range. Next slide. And there's it's essential that we have equity when we're looking at jobs in this industry. Energy careers are growing very quickly, and there's an increasing need. I just do not hear contractors saying that I can't find enough work to keep my people busy. What we hear over and over again is, I can't find enough people to do all of the work that's out there. If that's the case, where are we going to get more people? Part of the way that I believe we can do this is to tap into communities that have historically been underrepresented for a number of reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with their capabilities, their qualifications, their merit, any of that, and bring them in. So right now, despite the importance of addressing clean energy for all kinds of communities, especially perhaps our more urban communities. Right now, African Americans account for about 8 to 9% of the energy efficiency workforce. That, if we're going to do everything we need to do, that's going to need to change. Next slide. So this is, I'm certainly not going to read all of this, kind of the concept of urban sustainability that requires multiple types of justice, environmental justice that really is having the involvement of all people, regardless of many different demographic types, including race, color, income, national origin, with regard to developing environmental laws, regulations, and policies, climate justice that makes global warming not just environmental or physical, but ethical and political. Social justice that really it speaks to having the distribution of wealth and opportunities throughout the society, not just is kept within a certain subset of our society. And then procedural justice, making sure that the people who are affected are at the table when things are being discussed, not waiting to have something done to them, but be part of the discussion of what is going to be done with them and for them. And it's only when we have all of these that we're really able to move toward urban sustainability. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about health implications. Now, that's obviously different from energy and it's different from climate, but it is absolutely critical. They are absolutely tied together. When we are addressing things related to climate change, when we are addressing things related to energy, it also has huge impacts on health. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the health disparities that we see and tie that to the workforce development that we're talking about. So next slide. So let's start with just this basic fact that asthma rates are higher for children in poverty. So across the country, it's about 1 in 12 children has asthma. But children in families in poverty, it's 1 in only 9. So it's over 10%, it's over 11% of children in poverty have asthma. And then in some ways it gets even worse because if you talk about households below the poverty line, over 25% have a child with asthma. So these are the families that are having the most challenging time making ends meet, trying to hold down jobs, and they're having to spend time and money instead of going to work and instead of their children going to school, they're having to spend all of these resources just even trying to have their children stay alive. And that's just yet another burden that that kind of continues some of this cycle. Next slide. Asthma is the single biggest reason for missed school days. And a study done way back in 2006 showed that children with asthma missed about 9.2 days of school on average per year, which was 1.5 more than other children. So they're missing about 16% more school. That's time they're trying to stay alive instead of learning and enhancing their long-term earning potential. Next slide. Looking specifically at Chicago, this was a study that was done back around 2018, so pre-pandemic, that looked at rates of childhood, so ages 0 to 17, asthma-related emergency department visits, broken down by race and ethnicity. The first bar in each of these, this is from 2019 to 2009 to 2015, the first bar is the all ethnicities. What we see is that both Hispanic and Latino and non-Hispanic white are well below the average across all races and ethnicities. And that's because the rates for non-Hispanic, African American, or Black tend to be almost twice, like 80% or more greater than the average, and can be 5 times what it is for non-Hispanic white children. So we see that there are these really, really huge disparities by race, by ethnicity. Next slide. This is a breakdown of asthma rates in Chicago by neighborhood. So the red and orange are rates of 20% or higher of children having asthma. There's one neighborhood where the asthma rate in children is almost 50%. Next slide, or next tap, because we've got another image here. So this also shows the breakdown. Now we have purple and red as our 20% or higher. And the pie charts in each one of these neighborhoods shows the racial and ethnic composition. So the color black relating to Black or African American, the color brown relating to Hispanic, and white relating to white, non-Hispanic white individuals. And what we see again is where we have the highest rates of asthma also tend to be where we have the highest percentage of Black or African American families. Next slide. And it is not just asthma. There was a study done way back in 1999 that showed that socioeconomic was a very huge factor in COPD, maybe as great, if not greater than in any other disease. And there's also a study done over 30 years ago. Infants in lower socioeconomic status families had 39% rates of persistent oral respiratory illness, where compared to 24% in middle socioeconomic status families and 14% in high socioeconomic status families. So almost 3 times the rates of persistent lower respiratory illness between low socioeconomic status and high socioeconomic status back in 1992. Next slide. Yeah, so tying this back to the clean energy workforce, clean energy is about making homes better, homes more efficient, homes healthier, homes safer. It's also about reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, helping climate, which helps the outdoor air, which impacts these communities. So even if we're not specifically focused on health, there are bigger impacts, or more impacts, I don't know if they're bigger, but more impacts than climate, than energy, that are just even more reason, and there are these huge, huge disparities by race and ethnicity. And so it is, in my mind, it's extremely important, especially now, to be more intentional. Otherwise, we're only going to increase the divide. If there tends to be this kind of running away from DEIA, then the divide is going to get even larger. And in order to get there, in order to continue to remain mission focused and do our best work and have our best impacts, helping the most people who need the most help, it's going to require trust, participation by communities, by families, requires support, resources to help these families, and it requires the skilled workers to be able to do the good work in these homes and in these communities. And as a friend and colleague of mine likes to say, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And so how do we get any of these if we're basically having people drive in from outside who don't look like the people in these communities and say, we're here to help you? It's going to be so much better to get trust, participation, support, resources, and enough skilled workers if we really are intentional about engaging people from these communities to be full participants in the industry, not just waiting to see whether something happens. Next slide. And so back to you, Dr. Hills.
Thank you, Paul. I think the picture is clear on why equity is so important. So we're to the point where we talk about how do we stay mission focused? How do we continue the good work that we've been doing all of these years with funding to help sustain the work? But now that we don't have the funding, how do we stay mission focused? And I know I've talked to a lot of organizations and a lot of colleagues about just continuing to sustain the programs, continuing to be a resource, continuing to develop trust, continuing to participate and work with community-based organizations in order to reach the communities that we need to reach, not only for workforce development, but as you just shared, to alleviate some of the health implications. So with all of that said, I'm sure some of us are just like this little guy leaning up against a question mark. He's really trying to figure this out. Probably just feel like he's hitting his head on a wall at this point. But the work continues, and I'm going to ask Paul and Delmar to come off camera, to come on camera, so that we can just dive in and talk about some solutions. Again, we're going to ask them a few questions, but if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A option that you have available to please pause, Anna. Yes, we don't we don't want to make people dizzy with the slide. Michelle, you can stop the presentation at this time. So I will start with the first question, and it's for both of you. Many people are of the mindset that DEIA means lowering the standard or compromising the quality of the job. What does diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility mean to you personally and professionally? And Delmar, I'll start with you because we haven't heard your voice yet.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Hills, and I also want to thank Dr. Finley, as well as your teams for putting this event together, as well as everyone that's participating. It honestly, Dr. Hills, it was really difficult in some ways to prepare for this discussion because there's just so much going on, and I just have so much passion around this topic. But what I would say, just to start off the answer to your question, is the DEIA is about access. And I always center the conversation around access. So DEIA focuses on things like ensuring that everyone has access to resources. To me, it means that we're ensuring and are working to make sure that we have the best and brightest engaged, because when everyone has access, then we're able to engage the best of everyone. To me, as I think about it, it means that we're also creating awareness around biases and things that prevent us all from being at the table. But unfortunately, kind of where we are now is that we've turned DEIA into a slur. And it's often a synonym for slurs that we all have heard in the past. Much of our national conversation now is about attempts to oppress, instill fear in people, and to gain power. You know, we're attacking various groups on multiple fronts. We're attacking around race and ethnicity. We're attacking around gender. We're attacking around countries of origin. I was hearing something the other day where they're putting together a list of 120 plus countries that if you're from those countries, you're no longer welcome in America. The question I have for those that are supporting these kinds of policies, though, are what's next? Or who's next? Is it going to be age? Is it going to be geography? And people laugh about geography, but you watch the news and are we going to go to war with Canada or Panama or Greenland? And if so, why? We're picking these arbitrary identifiers and then saying that based on DEI, based on other rationale, we're creating a society of less than. And when we're able to create societies of less than, then it gives us an opportunity to oppress others. It gives us an opportunity to treat others how we want to be treated. The Holocaust just didn't pop up out of nowhere. If you look at the history before the Holocaust, mistreatment was prevalent. Taking away people's rights was prevalent. Inequity was prevalent. Removing people's access to education and jobs was very prevalent. So I have so much that I'm excited to share, Dr. Hills, but I'll kind of pull up there. But I just want people to think as we have this conversation, what is the truth? What are the facts? And is this zero-sum thinking that many of us are participating in the right path? And what I mean by that, we want to create a situation where I need to take away from you, Dr. Hills, in order for me to be whole? Or do we want to have equitable thinking that says, if we provide access to everyone, then we're able to get everyone's best. and then society as a whole benefits. And so when you ask me about what does DEIA mean to me, in a nutshell, it means access, and it means equitable sharing and uses of resources so that we can get the best out of everyone.
That's great, Delmar. Yesterday, I was sitting at my desk working and I wrote down access. The only thing on this sticky yesterday, just yesterday, it just came to me. I'm like, this conversation is about access. So I was channeling the color, I guess, because I had a yellow sticky and now today I have a yellow shirt. So Paul, talk to us about what DEIA means to you, personally and professionally.
So I'm going to start with the professional side. Obviously, I do not have the experience of being Black in America. I grew up in a middle class, majority white suburb of Newark, Delaware. And did not have that experience. I will never have that experience. I will never know what it is like. So for me, I kind of came at this from the professional side. I've been training people for over 20 years in the home performance industry, in weatherization, for utility programs. And I've been to a lot of homes that have been served by these programs. And I've seen the conditions that are faced by people who are being served in these programs, and have learned very much that these are not really choices. These are situations that they are in, not because they want to be, but because they are, and because we are not doing what's needed to really lift them out of those situations. But from the workforce side, I was seeing just tremendous, tremendous talent from people from all backgrounds, all races, all ethnicities, women, men. It didn't matter what your background was. There was talent everywhere. And if I'm going to be hiring somebody, let's say I've got a job that I'm looking for somebody for, and I could get 10 resumes or I could get 50 resumes, where of those 50, those 10 are 10 of them. Am I more likely to get the best candidate if I have 10 or if I have 50? I'm going to get more likely to get the best candidate if I have 50. And having seen so much amazing talent from all backgrounds, made it very clear to this guy who grew up in a majority white suburb of Newark, Delaware, that race and ethnicity has nothing to do with talent, capability, merit, a word that's being thrown around a whole lot right now. And that if we really want to get where we need to go, we need to be providing access to people with all of these backgrounds to be able to do our best work as an industry, as a society, and help people get into better living situations. And so with that, it became a very important thing for me to figure out ways to be able to promote that, understanding that I can't just walk into a majority Black community and say, I'm here to help you, and have people feel like that's something that they can believe. There's a lot of people who look like me who've done that and have not actually been there to help. They've been very extractive. So, how do I do that? And so, I've been fortunate enough to have some of those opportunities to drive some of that. But so from a professional perspective, it is very much like what Delmar was saying, that it is about access. It is about getting the best of everybody. I want the people with the talent to be able to help the people that need their talents. And you get that best when you provide the access to everybody. Then it also helps build trust. And once you start to have people of color on staffs and in the workforce, then other people of color see people that look like them and feel like it might be a place for them. It's hard for the people who are first. but we've got to get those people in order to get the people who are second. So what has become for me personally with all of that is just a much, much deeper understanding, I believe, of the situation faced by people who are left out for no reason other than what they look like, what gender they are, and that I strive for fairness, and then that is what equity is fairness. I've strived for fairness. I have a very strong sense of injustice when fairness is not delivered. And so from a personal perspective, DEIA is about doing what's right, simply doing what's right and being fair, giving everybody an opportunity regardless of their background, that will give society the best and them the best. People are going to have satisfaction with what they're doing if they're doing things that they're good at and they enjoy. Why aren't we giving people that opportunity?
That's great. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Delmar. So I heard access, fairness, doing what's right. I don't think any of these words or terms are offensive. Developing trust in the community. Paul, you hit the nail on the head. If you go to a low socioeconomic community, there might be some looks, but if Delmar and I go, they'll be like, they might give Delmar the handshake, the unspoken handshake that everyone knows. But it's important to build trust so that you get participation and access. There's enough room at the table for everyone. I always say that. And I think it's important that we have organizations that reflect the communities we serve. They should mirror those communities so that those communities can have the feeling that they are a part of the organization. So we'll move to the second question because I'm sure we can all go on and on and on about that first question and what it means to us. But what successes, and if you haven't had any of these initiatives within your prospective organizations, it's completely fine. But if you have, what successes have you had from deploying DEIA initiatives within your organizations? And either one of you can take a stab at that.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Hills. And I'll probably start off, if it's okay, with a little bit of a personal story, because I think it's important to make sure everyone fully can appreciate the fact that a lot of these discussions are also intergenerational as it relates to equity, access, inclusion. Um, and I'll try to keep this brief, but I remember talking to my grandmother, and she was blessed enough to be able to go to college. And I asked her about it. And she said that really, when she went to school, there were really two purposes for someone that looked and sounded like her to go to college. One was to meet a husband and get married. And the second choice was to get a job. And in order to get that job, your choices were actually limited. Because if you could think back to the time when my grandmother grew up, you pretty much, and once again, I don't, no intent to upset or offend anybody, but the choices were, if we're being blunt and honest, you could either work as a domestic, oftentimes working with or for cleaning up stores, homes of white folks, or you could get a job as some sort of professional in the Black community. And so she decided to be a teacher. Um, and I'll fast forward through the story, but long story short, she accomplished both. She found the husband and got the job as a teacher. Most of her kids were teachers. And my mom grew up during a lot of the segregated South integrating schools time. And from that, when I was born and grew up, and I was interested in college, most of what I knew was teachers. And one day at school, a guy brought me I don't know what you want to call it, an opportunity to go to the University of Maryland for a summer program in engineering. I didn't know any engineers. I didn't know any business professionals. And today that program would have been considered a DEI program. Now, one of the things that I always want to highlight about this is that even though it was a DEI program, I had to take the test. I had to do all of the work as an engineer. I had to pay for school. It wasn't about me getting something free or getting something that was taken away from somebody else and given to me. It was about me being provided an access to an opportunity. And from that opportunity, I was able to graduate. I was able to get a good job. And one of the first things when I got my job, Dr. Hills, and I say this not to brag, but to show appreciation, was I volunteered at the Dallas Public Schools and became a Big Brother in the Big Brother program because I felt that was my obligation since a gift was given to me to help me have access. Now with my kids, I'm able to pass that forward. And so if you look at this generationally, when you provide access, when you provide opportunities, and communities take advantage of these opportunities, then they're able to multiply that exponentially within their families and their communities. And so I share all that to say, you're like, where is the connection with our programs? That's why these programs are so important, Dr. Hills. One of those students sitting in one of your IREC programs could be my grandmother who got an opportunity to go to college. It could be me that got exposed to clean energy, having no family whatsoever that's ever worked in the clean energy space. And many of those individuals will then be able to be models for others in their community. What really scares me, Dr. Hills, and once again, this is why this is so personal. My daughter, my wife is a computer engineer, and my daughter wants to be an engineer in her footsteps, following in her footsteps. And when she went to school, I told her, I'm like, hey, you're an A student. Don't expect that you're going to get like straight A's and blah, blah, blah. You know, she smiled at me and went on and kept doing her thing and got pretty much all A's and got like 1B. She's working her tail off at school. And now she's watching on the news as the so-called meritocracy that's been established by the current administration is telling my daughter, who has busted her tail, who's working hard, that everything she got is because she's a DEI case, that she doesn't deserve it, and that because she is the wrong gender and the wrong color, she's not going to be successful in her chosen profession. So not only are we looking at this saying, are we looking at DEI the right way? Are we using it as a racial slur, or are we using it to create access now? But also, it has an implication generationally to my family if she is not given the opportunity to pursue access to opportunities because somehow she's less than now than what she is or should be. This is why there is a sense of urgency, not just at the program level for what IREC is doing or my organization, Elevate, or the great work that Paul is doing. It's because not only is it having an impact on creating jobs in our economy and folks in that economy, but also it is literally has the potential to cast us back into apartheid, into Jim Crow, into Reconstruction era thinking around the roles of women, people of color, around gender roles, and it just continues. We have to highlight the importance of the work that you are doing, that Dr. Finley is doing, and that many of us on this phone call are doing, so that we don't get set back 20, 50, 100, 200 years and end up somewhere where we don't want to be. And that's why, and I'll wrap up here, Dr. Hills, it scares me that the truth is optional, that people are consciously deciding that they're not going to engage in the discussion, and that apathy around these issues is prevalent. If we sit back and watch all of this happen, it's going to impact all of us. And all of us are going to be the lesser, because China is not going to care that we're infighting. Russia does not care that we're tearing each other down. They will gladly step into our place in the world order because we can't figure out how to get the best out of everybody in our society. And we decided that we wanted to make 40, 50% of our society less than, so that a slight few can benefit. That's why I have so much urgency on this. And that's why, Dr. Hills, it is just, I can't stress to everybody enough how important it is to not watch this like a spectator sport, but pick a lane, have a position, and fight for what you believe in.
That was awesome. Thank you, Delmar. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for personalize it. I tell you, stories, impactful stories, or storytelling is so important. That's one thing that I love about IREC's internship program is that we're giving people access and a glimpse and a peek into our industry. And it's really beneficial, because otherwise, do we even know what clean energy is? It's not talked about in middle schools. It's barely spoken about, if at all, in high schools, and in college, maybe, but maybe not. So it really is about taking this and kind of being a vessel to others. And I love the, pick a lane and not be a spectator, because I feel like this paralyzes so many people. But Paul, let's hear from you. Anything you want to add to that? And if not, we can go into the next question.
Well, so I agree with what you said. Stories are powerful. And so I want to respond with a story. And yeah, so because of seeing so much talent in the people that I was training, that made me really want this to be something that I could work in, this space, the DEIA space. And so one of the things I've done, I've spent a lot of time talking to people, really learning about it, trying to immerse myself in truly understanding it, not the superficial noise that some people think it is, but what it really is. And so a couple of stories that have stemmed from that, I've had the opportunity to work with some colleagues on a youth workforce development program that focuses on high school youth from underrepresented communities. So far, it's specifically been in the south suburbs of Chicago. And in that, we teach them about sustainability. We teach them about building science. We teach them about leadership. We teach them about advocacy. And so, we have had in the cohorts that we've had so far, there's not been a single student who has been white. Not that we would exclude white students, but just where we are working, that is a relatively small minority, pretty small minority of the student population. And they have not, and so, and it's not like we're talking about 100 kids. We're talking about like 17, 18 students. So it's not a huge number. But one of the successes we've had with that is we had an amazingly talented young Black man in his as a rising senior in high school from the south suburbs of Chicago, ended up being on a youth panel at the COP28 climate summit in Dubai, speaking about the challenges facing communities like his to world leaders who were there collectively for this climate summit. And to have somebody from our program, from this community, able to represent his communities at an event like that, we're not talking at a high school graduation ceremony. This is where Al Gore goes. This is where John Kerry goes. This is where Greta Thunberg goes. This is where biggest names around the world go to have these conversations. And he was there as a speaker. The other success I'll share, as I have really tried to embrace all of this, is we hired a black man to be a trainer at our training center. And it's not always been easy for him. There's not a lot of Black people as trainers within the weatherization training center network. Well, last year at a conference, and this it's a conference for an organization I was former chair of the board for. When I was the chair of the board, we really tried to make sure that DEIA was something that we highlighted and infused throughout the conference, not just a track where we could say it's pigeonholed into this track, but it's infused throughout everything. And my observation is that it has made the conference feel more welcoming for people of color, with more belonging, more accessibility. And I feel like the tenor, the atmosphere of that conference has really been better in those years since we started to do this. Well, so last year, this guy that is now on our training team gave a presentation. It was his first national conference presentation. He got up there. I was there at the room, and I looked out at the audience, and I realized that there were a lot of people of color in the audience. And I realized that this was a big deal, not just for him, as the first time he was giving a presentation at a conference, but that it was so unusual for a person of color to be giving the scientific, technical session at this conference. He was there for 100 people. 100 people were seeing this as the first time. And the energy was electric. There was so much excitement. And I'll tell you, he got like some of the best reviews I've ever seen of a presenter from that conference. It was just absolutely incredible. And so it was a situation where what we did, the work we have done, made it so many, many, many people saw themselves in these roles and thought, this, there's room for growth. There's advancement. I can see myself there. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you. And you and I have had many conversations about NHPC, the BPA, my thoughts of attending my very first NHPC conference. And it was under your leadership where I could see myself being a part of BPA and talking about being on the board and what that looks like. And it was because I saw myself at that conference. I could see myself reflected in the presenters that you have and how the message was infused, not in a track like this. And we're going to set this aside for those who are interested, but throughout the conference. And it really makes a difference for attendees to be able to see themselves and recognize themselves in presenters and conversations and topics. So thank you for that. And it's really important to have Paul, you specifically, have these conversations. And we'll get to that. But first, we want to talk a minute about how do we remain mission focused in all that we have shared thus far. How do we remain mission focused in today's climate? And either one of you can pick that up if you have something to share. How encourage the attendees on the call, not to get discouraged, not to lose sight of your mission, but just stay the course and remaining mission focused.
Yeah. And Paul, I think we've been doing good with the alternating. So if you're cool, I'll keep the pattern going. Great question, Dr. Hills. And I think the first thing that we have to do is, and it pains me that I have to say this, but we need to focus on truth and facts. We're in a time period in our history where these things seem to be optional and up for debate. We need to see what's going on. When we have the Air Force removing a group called the WASP, and if folks aren't familiar, I'll put a link in the chat. But they are women in the Air Force, service pilots that basically delivered planes for the war off the assembly line. And without them, we wouldn't have won World War II. Or Tuskegee Airmen being deleted, or the commandant of the Coast Guard being not only unceremoniously fired, but then while she's out of town, getting evicted from her housing. When we have situations where Jackie Robinson was removed from the DoD website, a distinguished veteran and a civil rights icon, because he's quote unquote DEI, we have to see what is going on and then be comfortable saying this is not okay and not having to feel apprehensive about it. We need to understand that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Article 7 tell us that DEI programs are not just legal, but expected. We should not have to live in fear that the government is going to come after us in these spaces. But all that said, Dr. Hills, we have to work and live in the ecosystem that we're in. So what are some of the strategies that we can take in that space? I think there's several things. One, be clear on the mission of our organization, or I guess technically that's two, is to be clear on the mission of our organization. Who are we? What principles are we going to stand on? And when are we going to push back? When are we going to align with others to fight for what we believe in? And I totally get it. Some of these language changes that you lose your federal funding if you don't change this language. I know you and I have had these conversations. These are tough decisions to make. But if we're not having those discussions, if we're not pushing back, then we're going to end up in a place where we've erased all of the progress we've made. What are we doing from a policy perspective? You know, there are a lot of great battles. I know within BPA, our policy team is in Washington every day having these conversations. So what guidance are we providing to our policy professionals so that as they're having these conversations with Congress, et cetera, how are those things moving forward? And then one of the things that really has given me strength in this space, Dr. Hills, related to this question, is when we do decide how we are going to fight the fight, that we are comfortable standing in that space. Because what I saw and what I'm seeing is that communities are watching us, individuals are watching us. And when they see that IREC is continuing to have their workforce training programs, or that Paul is moving forward with multiple JEDI, I think is the term you use for your events, Paul, of activities, events, and training programs. It strengthens others, and then collectively we're able to move forward. And I say all this to say, I'm not begrudging, I'm not judging anyone. Every business, every individual has to make the decision that is best for their organization. But I'm also saying we are in a period now where we have to stand up and be counted. And I personally could not watch this as a bystander and then go look that daughter that I just mentioned earlier in the face and tell her to go out and fight for her job and fight for the opportunities that she has rightfully earned. I could not look my son in the face and tell him that at the moment where the chips were on the table, I folded and pushed away from the table, you know. So I think to me, those are some of the things that I'm thinking about. The two things that I'll put in the chat, Dr. Hills, that I think are helpful are one, because it is Women's History Month, it is important to me that we know this history. And so I'm going to put an article about the WASP in the chat so that folks can read it and learn about their contribution to our great country. And then I'm also going to put in there an article that may provide some on the call, some insight and guidance on how to navigate this ecosystem that we're in. I'm not saying I agree with every recommendation or even the holistic framing, but what I do like about it is providing some guidance and direction for many of us who are struggling to figure out how to plug in.
Thank you, Delmar. Without being mission oriented, the young man that Paul referenced having an opportunity to go to Dubai and participate in such and with such an elite panel for a speaking opportunity wouldn't have it if we weren't mission oriented. IREC has a lot of amazing programs from regulatory, local initiatives, and workforce development where we're connecting job seekers, employers, training providers to provide opportunities for those who may not even know about the great work that we're doing. It's important to stay mission oriented. So Paul, I'll turn it to you for a response if you have one.
Yeah, so certainly, you know, what Delmar said of speaking truths, you know, facts, what is it? People can have their own opinions, but they can't have their own facts, I think is something that was said in a political debate one time. Yeah, I think that is part of it. But let's be honest, there are a lot of people who just do not care about the facts. They have decided this is where they're going. If facts were all that mattered, we wouldn't be having these discussions right now because it would be a very different political climate. This is the reality. There are a lot of people who do not care about facts. We're not going to be able to convince everyone. But do we stop just because we can't convince everyone? Absolutely not. I think, you know, for me, part of it is, what are our values? Our values are aligned with our mission. What are our values? Are our values transactional? Do we change our values because the political climate changes? If we do, then are they really our values? Or are they just things we say? So if we really have those values, then how are we? Maybe we can't just do it the same way we were doing it a year ago. That doesn't mean the values go away. That doesn't mean the work goes away. How do we still do it? Do good anyway. If you're not going to get support from there, who are your allies? Where do we get the support to be able to continue to do the work? Maybe you find new allies. You know, it's been interesting in another organization I'm a part of. there's been discussion of, do we change the name? Do we get rid of this whole thing entirely? And then we find out that among the younger set of folks in the membership who are maybe not as loud as some, we'd lose 10% of our members if we change the name away from DEI, because there are people who really care that it is there and it speaks to them. And so I think remembering that there are people, whether they're noisy or not, that really value this, really think that this is essential, remembering the work we do, remembering what it's for. We are not in this business to make money. There's a lot of ways to make money to be able to feed our families. We're in this business. We do need to make money, obviously, to feed our families, but we've chosen this field because it matters for something more than the opportunity to feed our families. Why are we here? And how do we continue to do that work, regardless of what's going on? And also remember, in a few years, all of this may well go away and the pendulum swings back. And as you both have been saying, people are watching us. If we come off as transactional now, we will have a harder time regaining credibility, because the next time it'll be like, oh, are you still being transactional? Or are you going to swing back the other way? If we've already taken a stand, changing the stand we take be so much harder to take the right stand again in the future. So I think just keeping ourselves centered, remembering what it's really about, who it's really about, and do not have your values be for sale.
A lot of nuggets here. So Paul, I'm going to volley it back to you. We're going to open it up for questions from the attendees here pretty soon, but I do have two very important questions for both of you. I won't elaborate on what you said because for the sake of time, we just need to move forward, but those are really good points. During these turbulent times and these times of uncertainty with federal funding, and what do you do? Talk to us about the importance, and I think you just led into this question about the importance of being an ally.
Yeah, to me, obviously, as I've been talking about kind of my background here, I've had to learn a lot of this from other people. I've had to really decide that I was going to be open to learning about all of this, and I have wanted to be the best ally that I can be. It's been a journey, and I feel like it's only been in the last year or two that I've felt comfortable enough in myself in this space to really start to be an ally. There was definitely a lot of time when I felt like, what right do I have to speak up on this when it's, if we're talking about racial issues, what right do I have to speak up about this instead of our Black and brown colleagues? And what I've learned is sometimes it's even more important, because if the only people who speak up about, about these issues are, say, Black and brown people, then it seems like it's only a Black and brown issue. It seems like people are becoming tribal. They're lining up with their tribe. When somebody like me, who does not have that background, speaks up, then it's harder for the people who look like me to say that it's a Black and brown issue. It can make it so that in some ways it can be harder for them to deny it. It can make it easier for them to reflect on it and accept that these are important issues for them, that DEIA is about humanity, not specific individuals. So I think that it is very important to continue, because of the fact that it does make it about everybody, and it kind of invites people who look like me to be part of the conversation and reflect on where they could be in this. But I think also, look, in a time like what we're in right now, this is something I've thought about quite a lot. I could decide not to put my time and effort into this. I could say, you know what? Times are tough on DEIA. I'm just going to not do this right now because it's hard, because it's scary or dangerous, or I'm going to have my funding pulled or whatever. And I can go around as a white male and not have to worry about it. But the fact that I can do that is its own form of privilege. And it is not in alignment with my values. It's not in alignment with everything that I've learned in this space. And so what I've realized is that maybe I can back off if I wanted to. So many people, neither you, Dr. Hills, nor you, Delmar, can back off. As Black Americans, you can't pretend you're not, right? And so it's like, if I back off because I can, then I have left my friends and my colleagues without allies who don't look like them. I will rest when you can rest. And until you can rest, I won't rest. And I feel like I have an obligation to do so because I could rest. I have an obligation to not rest until you can rest. And I just think it's so important so that it shows that there is a broader community that cares, and shows people who don't believe in it that it is not tribal.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for your allyship. Delmar, last question before we move into the Q&A questions. I see we have two there. If you have questions, please drop them in your Q&A option that you have at the bottom of your screen. Delmar, quantifying the impact of DEIA initiatives can be challenging, making it difficult to demonstrate their effectiveness and justify further investment. How do you quantify DEIA, and what does it mean not only in your day-to-day work, but also elevate your organization?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Dr. Hills. And I just wanted to speak to Paul's comment
Absolutely.
earlier. He walks the walk with that. Even yesterday, him and I were having a conversation about an issue that we're trying to work through for an organization that we're part of. And when he has questions, he raises up and asks the questions. And he's also not afraid to jump into some tough conversations and not just learn from those conversations, but often lead others and create a path. And so I want to thank Paul as well for his allyship. I think to the question that you raised, Dr. Hills, once again, I shared my story humbly, but I think you used the word a taste. You know, I had a taste of an engineering program for 6 weeks, and from that taste, I was able to basically change my life. I think there are ways that we can measure the things that we're doing and the impacts. For programs that we run around workforce development, there's a saying that you can't fix what you can't measure. And so whenever we build programs, are we measuring who signed up, what jobs they got? In my case, did he enroll in school? How did he do? Did he graduate? You know, did he get a job? How did that job compare to other jobs he might have had? So there's a lot of data that can be collected as part of the process. I would also say, from the standpoint of quantifying things, we don't have to fear quantification. I know that may fall on deaf ears coming from a STEM nerd, but I think it is important that we find ways of quantifying and capturing data, and also sharing our data with others and learning from the data from others. I think there's also a way to statutorily require data to be collected in these programs. In Illinois, I was part of the team that legislated minimum equity standards. And that's not just about race, it's about when we have programs. A real quick good example is in Illinois, there are power plants closing. And many of those power plants are in rural communities that are predominantly white, very few, if any, people of color. And when those plants close, are we making those communities whole? What's the impact on the tax base? If they're funding the police, the Kiwanis Club, and the softball team, how does that get taken care of? Equity is about providing what that community needs to be whole, just like in Peoria and in Chicago, we're providing the resources that Black and Latino communities. That's equity. It's not about saying you don't need this, or because I don't need it, you don't need it. And so I think it is important as we measure these things to also not get locked in that just because I measure it a certain way for a workforce development program in one geography, that it needs to be identical in another. It's what's important, how do we measure it, what do we do with those measurements, and then can we use that quantification to make the programs more effective? And in many cases, just because the feds are showing their backside right now as it relates to DEI, doesn't mean that at the state level, the county level, and the community level, we can't continue to do this. So I would encourage us all not to live in fear, because the fear is the point. Find allies that can work with us, whether it's in other states, other programs, et cetera, and then build our programs such that they're showing value, not just from a strict, we train this number of people, but also economic value and community value, so that we can get those programs funded on a broader scale.
Thank you. Thank you both for such great insight and feedback and sharing personal stories. We do have two open questions, and I'll read the first one, and either one of you can respond if you have a response. It says, how can we build a diverse workforce while also mitigating any legal risk stemming from the executive orders and the recent EEOC technical documents?
I can start on that. So first, one thing to remember is that an executive order is not a law. In order for there to be a law, Congress has to pass a law, and it has to be signed by the president. An executive order is about how the executive branch operates within their purview. Things that we do outside of that, really the executive order has no legal bearing on us as far as I understand. That doesn't mean there's no risk, because there are, it is under attack right now. But I would say that at some level, to say that a non-diverse workforce is preferred, which I do not believe, would imply that the merits, skills, abilities, capabilities reside only within a certain demographic. If we believe that only white people are able to do certain jobs, that's what would lead to a non-diverse workforce. We see that in Missouri, the Attorney General filed a lawsuit against Starbucks for being more female and less white, implying that white men are more qualified to make coffee than women or people of color. So if we believe that there's actually talent, regardless of demographic, that says that the most fair thing is a diverse workforce. How do we do it without running afoul of anything? I'd say part of it is, when you're hiring, have a good rubric for how you're making the decision for who to hire. You're going to have a bunch of candidates. What's the rubric? If the person with the most merit, if the person with the best qualifications is a person of color, then hire them without fear. The EEOC documents are about illegal discrimination. Hiring a Black person is not illegal discrimination against white people. hiring a black person because the black person was the most qualified is good hiring practice. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. Delmore, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll keep it really brief. Paul, you were right, aligned with what I was thinking as you answered it. I was like, the first part of it is to kind of know the law, because there is a lot of bluster out there. Once again, my comment earlier that DEI has turned into a slur that's used oftentimes to say we don't want any Black women, Latino, or other groups that are defined as other involved. And so sometimes it's good to think about it from an anti-discrimination perspective, which is what you very eloquently walked through. The other thing is, if we just take a step back and look at a lot of what we're doing, it's not and it shouldn't be illegal to create a job program. It's not illegal to train people on how to install HVAC equipment or to work as a energy auditor. And so a lot of the term I use a lot around the word access is where are you focusing your marketing dollars and where are you focusing your outreach? And so there are ways of developing, funding, and supporting programs where you don't have to use the word Black, Latino, or woman, where you can clearly create a program that is meant to create jobs, access, and training programs, and that you market those programs in and around communities where those jobs would be highly desired. And I'm also happy, Dr. Hills, there's a lot of groups that are working on how to frame these discussions, many of which are probably on the phone. So the last thing I would say is if you're trying to figure it out you're on your own, is to collaborate with some of the thought leadership that's probably on this call and outside of this call that's doing that very thing. Because many of us just refuse to be held back and held down. We're trying to understand the law. We're trying to understand how we can craft programs that work within the context of some of this language. And we're also trying not to live in fear because a lot of it will not hold up in court per the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and other both constitutional and legal statutes that are currently on the books.
Thank you, Delmar. Thank you so much. We have 8 minutes left and 2 questions. So 4 minutes per question. How can we reach the funding sources that we need to run these programs when those funders are potentially pausing support? What's the narrative we can leverage to belay concern? And I think both of you just kind of spoke to this, but I'll let you respond. Either one of you.
So, a few thoughts I've had. One is sometimes, we can't absolutely guarantee that we can continue to always get the same support from the same sources as we've gotten. And this might be an opportunity to build new partnerships and find new allies. There are a lot of organizations that simply cannot go away from DEI, no matter what their beliefs are, what their fears about the federal government are. So, are there organizations that might be good partners that we just haven't pursued because we haven't needed to? And maybe now is the time. If we're going to hold firm on this, maybe that's actually a marketing point, a selling point. We don't want to give up on this, but we need help to be able to continue. So what are the opportunities there? I think another thing is, you see all this stuff. I've said the word merit a few times today in this webinar. I believe very firmly that DEIA is about merit. Where we hear this stuff about merit as though if a person of color or a woman gets a job, it must not have been because of merit, which again implies that only white men are capable to do much of anything. So in my mind, DEIA is about merit. It's regardless of race, ethnicity, veteran status, gender, all of these things. You have the qualifications, you have the capability, you have the skills, you have the aptitude to do this. So I think talking about how we are running a merit-based work. Now, I don't know what the program is that the questioner was asking about, but given that DEIA is about merit, not having DEI, that is what's not about merit. That's where people who are not white are not being allowed to get positions because of merit. With DEI, that's where the merit does allow itself to come through. So we are running merit-based programs that should speak to those folks who are worried that you're being preferential, if that's applicable. So those are just a couple of thoughts. And then again, remember, federal government is only one source. Federal government is not everything.
So I'll just do some quick bullets. Once again, Paul, you and I are in full alignment around that. One, I'm an optimist, and so I would say don't give up hope. There's a lot of really smart people that are fighting some of the current executive orders, and they're somewhere between illegal and unconstitutional, many of them. So I think those battles will be won, but they'll take time. Two, to Paul, to your point, I think there's other funding sources that are out there. Looking at state, also philanthropy sees what's going on, and many philanthropic organizations are stepping up, and there's some private sector funding. And then the third one that I would just highlight is, especially in the clean energy space, a lot of the work that we do isn't necessarily a 100% DEI program. So if you're running a workforce program, there are ways where you can write your grant applications to access the funding without using a lot of the quote unquote banned DEI language. But then when it's time for you to market your program, focus on access and focus your marketing on the audiences that you most want to help. And you can set up programs like that. And a lot of that funding is also still available. But I would just say quickly, this is hard. It's not easy. So in explaining it quickly, our intent is not to make it sound easier than it is, because there's a lot of people that are working so hard to figure out how to move forward.
Thank you. Thank both of you. This question is the last question I think is very important, and it would help this individual. So if you can provide some context, that would be great. And Avery, if you can drop the ACE Network apprenticeship email in the chat for Elias, that may be helpful as well, so he can get some insight into the apprenticeship programs that may be available to him. What advice do you have for a solar technician from Lagos, Nigeria, looking for a greener pastures in the United States of America? Is there apprenticeship opportunities I can leverage on to grow my career and to help better my standard of living? Thank you for your question. Either one of you.
I'm definitely happy to jump in, but Paul, I want to make sure.
Go ahead, Delmar.
Yeah, there is a lot of actually good workforce development programs. One of the ways to reach me is via my LinkedIn account. So I would encourage you to reach out. There's actually, I believe, 2 Nigerian companies that work in the solar space that I'm happy to connect you with. But I would say in general, I know especially in Illinois, there are multiple state workforce development programs that are out there. Also, the organization that all 3 of us are on the board for, Building Performance Association, has connections at the state level and can help guide you towards some of the workforce development partnerships that are out there that specifically focus on solar. But right now, I know there's a lot of dollars that are focused in several states. I don't want to name them because I'll leave some of them out, but like California, Illinois, Massachusetts, I believe Connecticut has a program. So just reach out to Paul and I, or BPA, a Building Performance Association, and we'll be happy to make some connections for you.
We also have a comment in the chat. A Nigerian company is in attendance today, and I think the gentleman said you can reach out. So grab that email or that website that gentleman just listed, and we're at time 2:30. Thank you so much. To all of the attendees, thank you for your time. Thank you for attending the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance webinar. And to our presenters, thank you so much. I think this webinar was great. It provided a lot of insight and resourceful information. And we hope to see you back here on May 15th for the next webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.